seem all that packed with CGI, but it actually took more digital wizardry to pull off the dystopian smash hit than you might think. The cast and crew didn't actually have to worry about being killed during the infamous red light green light challenge, but the filming of this sequence wasn't exactly a walk in the park either. In addition to the major cast members, there were also 300 extras and 20 martial arts actors on the set. The initial script originally envisioned 1,000 players, but creator Hwang Dong-hyuk quickly realized that this wasn't viable. While 300 is a lot less than 1,000, the scene was still a nightmare to orchestrate. Since some of the violent deaths were shot in slow motion, it was all too easy for actors to mess up a take and then have to start over. As Hwang recalled to Vanity Fair, it took about 20 to 30 minutes if we got a wrong take and had to plant the fake blood in them again. Whenever this happened, Hwang would go to a different part of the set and film another character's death while the crew cleaned up the fake blood and got the initial actor back into position. With such a complicated set piece, they couldn't afford to waste a second. One particular shot in the red light green light sequence was especially tricky to film. The moment when Ali grabs Gi-hun to keep him from falling. It wasn't easy for the actors to hold that awkward position, nor was it comfortable. It was also pretty much physically impossible.
여기 원래 와이어가
And it's kind of messed
이게
up.
어떻게
Y'all
사람을
ain't
손으로
watched
절대로
it.
잡을 수가 없더라고요. 이게
He was a good
아무리 힘이
person.
센 사람도 이렇게 잡는 건 불가능해서.
Messed over at the end.
Furthermore, the wire lifted Lee Jung-jae's shirt unnaturally, so not only did the effects team have to edit out the wire in post-production, they also needed to tweak Gi-hun's uniform. Otherwise, it would have been painfully obvious that there was a wire underneath. Many of the locations in Squid Game were constructed in real life, with the production crew building everything from the bunk beds to the arena for the marbles game. However, that doesn't mean that these scenes didn't require computer-generated imagery, as the VFX team still needed to extend the sets digitally.
We did a lot of computer graphics work at the post-production stages to connect different spaces and to create the space that wasn't able to be created in reality.
For example, the background of the tug-of-war room was digitally modified to make the area seem even more cavernous than it actually was. The effects team did indeed build the tug-of-war platforms, but the actors weren't very high off the ground, save for a handful of shots of the players being pulled over the edge. Likewise, while the crew did construct a segment of the room with all the stairs, they used CGI to extend the set and make it seem like the stairs went spiraling deep into the ground.
That's cool.
The painted background of the red light green light arena is actually CGI, which might sound strange considering that it could have easily been built physically. So why did the VFX team go through the trouble of using a blue screen instead of just painting the wall? To put it simply, Hwang Dong-hyuk hadn't made up his mind yet when the sets were built, so CGI was utilized to give him the option to change the design later. At first, Hwang considered making the arena walls more colorful. However, visual effects supervisor Chung Jae-hoon had a different idea. As he explained in an interview with the Visual Effects Society, maybe we should have a buffer zone for the first episode, because if we just go all out on the colorful and the flashy from the very beginning, people might find it childish. Jae-hoon also likened the sets to The Truman Show and how that movie's artificial world seems almost but not quite real. Ultimately, the final design that Hwang settled on was a backdrop that was just real enough to be convincing and just fake enough to feel unsettling.
와 진짜를 알아가면서 죽음과 산과를 이렇게 막 혼란스럽게 만드는 공간으로 잡아봤고요.
The trippy game arenas weren't the only sets brought to life with VFX, as the environments outside the games also required some digital magic. For example, the famous overhead shot of the island at the end of the first episode would have looked very different without visual effects. The massive arena with a retractable roof was actually filmed on a modest patch of land that only contained a couple of warehouses, while the rest was added digitally. Likewise, the sequence where the cars leave the ferry and enter the island is not what it appears to be. As Chung Jae-hoon explained, people think that it was actually filmed on an island, but it was just like a really random part of Korea. In this landlocked filming location, the crew took advantage of an existing waterway and then added the rest with CGI. And believe it or not, the entire airport from the season finale is fake. The original plan was to film that scene in a real airport, but that wasn't possible due to COVID-19 restrictions. So instead, it was shot in the studio and computer wizardry transformed it into an airport. For Hwang Dong-hyuk, the safety of his cast and crew were of the utmost importance, so when it came time to film the grisly player eliminations, he took extra safety precautions for any scenes involving guns, and in some cases even the sounds of the gunfire were fake. So while Hwang did shoot some of the death scenes with realistic gunfire sound effects, there were other times when he just shouted. Each time Hwang did this, Lee Jung-jae and the other actors flinched as if they heard a real gunshot. If we were in their shoes, we'd probably flinch too. Squid Game's
That's
tug-of-war
crazy.
scene was so draining that the actors had to catch their breath between takes, with some of them resting on the short yellow rail at the edge of the platform. Meanwhile, Lee Jung-jae had a little stool that he would pull up. Most of the actors agreed that the tug-of-war sequence was the hardest to film.
줄다리기 이런 거를 할 경험이 많이 있지는 않잖아요. 실제로 엄청난 체력을 요구하더라고요.
While filming this sequence, the actors were actually competing against a special machine designed to pull on the rope. As Lee Yu-mi explained to The Swoon, we were really using all of our strength to play against a machine, not a group of people, so no matter how hard we pulled, we couldn't win. You'll probably be relieved to learn that most of the Glass Stepping Stones challenge was actually filmed close to the ground. The set was still 1.5 meters, or approximately 5 feet, off the ground, which allowed the crew to film shots from underneath the glass bridge, as well as stage the shots where characters fell to their deaths. Behind-the-scenes footage shows one extra leaping onto the space where a glass panel should be, except that there's no glass. Instead, there's a platform that was later erased by VFX that drops quickly and smoothly the moment she puts her weight on it. After it fell, she crouched down to make sure her body would no longer appear in the shot. Even though the bridge wasn't as high in real life as it appears in the final version, it was still plenty convincing for the actors.
다리 한 1.5m 정도 높이. 그거는 사실 더 낮출 수도 있었는데 그건 이제 감독님이 일부러 그러셨죠. 배우들.
Unsurprisingly, this set actually scared some of the show's stars.
가짜로 하는 게 아니라 진짜 그들이 느끼는 공포감이 몸에 표현이 돼서
Not every Squid Game scene was filmed from a comfortable height. For a handful of shots in the glass bridge sequence, the actors actually filmed on a separate set that was approximately 6 meters, or about 19 feet, off the ground. The VFX team later composited the two sets digitally. Behind-the-scenes footage shows Min Yao and Dok Soo being raised on a harness, along with the glassmaker taking a tumble from the glass bridge.
그때가 좀 되게 짜릿하고 그랬었어요.
Even from the safety of the editing room, the footage from these scenes gave editor Nam Na-young a case of vertigo. To convey the scale and the stakes of this game, the crew also built a third set just for filming all the broken bodies of the contestants who hit the floor. To film the unforgettable scene where the glass bridge explodes, the Squid Game team shot in slow motion with a phantom camera, which can record at 3,000 frames per second. As a result, the actors had to be very careful not to turn away too soon, or otherwise the timing wouldn't line up. Between takes, a crew member would come in and make very precise slashes in the sleeve of Jung Hoi-yeon's uniform so that it would look as though the glass was cutting her clothes. For the glass itself, it started with a practical effect, as the actors were sprayed with particles designed to resemble glass. Afterwards, they had to shake these particles from their hair. Of course, the rest of the bridge exploding was shot separately. At first, the visual effects team tried shooting it practically, but they weren't happy with that result, so they opted instead for a CGI explosion. As CG supervisor, Kang Moon-jung told the Visual Effects Society, "A lot of people thought that CG can never be better than the real shot, but actually, for this sequence, CG turned out to be even better than the real shot." But that didn't exactly mean it was easy, as the visual effects team had to erase and replace the reflections in every single glass shard. One of the most intense Squid Game sequences is the final contest, in which Gi-hun and Song-woo fight to the death. It was filmed in the same location as the red light, green light sequence, yet the set couldn't look more different. The lighting is more overcast, and the crew used sprinklers to simulate a heavy downpour. The camera crew wore ponchos and used waterproof coverings to keep their equipment from getting wet. However, the actors weren't so lucky. They had to shoot an intense fight scene while they were soaking wet, and it was freezing outside. As Lee Jung-jae recalled to Entertainment Weekly, "It was in winter, so the weather was very cold. I remember filming that scene for about 4 days in the rain with the sprinkler, so it was very emotionally and physically tough."
I want to end here.
Even some of the most ordinary shots in Squid Game would look different without special effects. For instance, the ceilings of most of the arenas were inserted digitally after filming. In the red light, green light arena, the walls of the set were just a bit taller than the blue screen, meaning they cast shadows on the ground that wouldn't make sense in the final, fully edited scene. Thus, the VFX team needed to digitally erase some of the shadows. And while you might think that the giant piggy bank containing all the prize money could be easily filmed practically, that wasn't actually the case. The crew did build a physical piggy bank, but then they soon realized that it wouldn't work, as the plexiglass was so reflective that it was hard to actually make out the money inside when a spotlight was shining on it. So they created a CG version instead. All of these VFX shots probably slipped under the radar of most viewers, and that's exactly how the Squid Game team likes it. As Kang Moon-jung told the Visual Effects Society, "What director Hwang wanted and what the VFX crew wanted was to not make CG look like CG, so people can just take it for granted.